Rachel Carter's voice echoed through the grand yet familiar lobby of the Blue Ridge Inn. The place looked nothing like it did when she first returned home to Asheville, North Carolina 8 months ago. The once dated, fading interiors had been replaced with modern yet cozy aesthetics, a reflection of Rachel's expertise in the hospitality industry. And yet, none of it mattered. "What do you mean Mark is taking over? I saved this hotel." Rachel's voice trembled with disbelief as she stared at her father. Her mother sighed, offering a tight, dismissive smile. "Sweetheart, Mark has a natural gift for leadership. You're too focused on the details, you always have been." Rachel felt the weight of every sacrifice she had made crashing down on her. She had walked away from a 6-figure job in New York, sold her condo, and spent months pulling this place out of financial ruin. But instead of recognition, she was being cast aside in favor of her younger brother, Mark, a man who had never held a job for more than a year. As if on cue, Mark strolled in, hands in his pockets, wearing the same smug expression he'd had since childhood. "Hey, Rach, don't take it personally. Someone has to handle the big picture while you take care of, the day-to-day stuff." Rachel clenched her fists. Day-to-day stuff? The stuff that saved this business from bankruptcy? Tonight, at the staff meeting, her parents would officially announce Mark as the new manager, the same meeting where Rachel was supposed to present their record-breaking quarterly results. She looked around, catching the eyes of her employees, people who knew the truth. Yet, just like her, they had no choice but to pretend this was normal. 8 months ago, Rachel Carter had stood in the same lobby, but back then, it was falling apart. When her father called, his voice heavy with regret, saying the Blue Ridge Inn was weeks away from bankruptcy, Rachel hadn't hesitated. She sold her condo in New York, left her 6-figure job, and moved back home to save the family business. What she found was worse than she had imagined. The once charming Mountain Inn was a ghost town. The carpets were stained, the furniture outdated, and the reservation system was still stuck in the early 2000s. The few remaining guests left scathing reviews: falling apart, unprofessional staff, not worth the price. Rachel rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She upgraded the booking system, brought in new vendors, and used her industry connections to get Blue Ridge featured in travel magazines. The lobby was redesigned with a modern rustic aesthetic, and the rooms were revamped to attract higher-paying guests. She worked long nights, crunching numbers, negotiating deals, and personally training staff. Every dollar spent was calculated to bring maximum return. And it worked. Bookings doubled, the guest rating soared. For the first time in years, the Blue Ridge Inn was profitable. But the real victory? Seeing the pride in her team's eyes, Maria, the housekeeping manager, beaming at a job well done. The front desk staff finally excited to come to work. Rachel thought she had proven herself. She thought her parents would see her value. She had no idea how wrong she was. The moment Mark Carter was handed control of Blue Ridge Inn, everything Rachel had built started unraveling. It began with small, careless decisions. Mark, armed with zero hospitality experience but endless confidence, made sweeping changes without understanding the impact. First, he cut the complimentary breakfast to save costs, ignoring the fact that it was one of their highest-rated guest perks. When Rachel tried to show him the data, he laughed. "Guests will get over it. Who really books a hotel for breakfast anyway?" Then, he pushed out longtime employees, replacing them with younger, inexperienced hires, many of whom quit within weeks. Maintenance requests piled up, complaints about cleanliness and poor service flooded in. Rachel watched in horror as the guest ratings, which she had painstakingly rebuilt, plummeted within months. She tried reasoning with her parents. "He's making reckless choices that are driving the business into the ground." But her mother dismissed her concerns with a wave of her hand. "Mark is just adjusting, give him time." Then came the breaking point. One morning, Rachel walked into the lobby to find Maria, the housekeeping manager of 20 years, in tears. "Mark fired me," she whispered. "He says I'm not flexible enough with his new scheduling system." Rachel saw red. She stormed into her parents' office, ready to fight for Maria's job. only to be met with shrugs and indifference. That was the moment she knew. No matter what she did, they would always choose Mark. And she was done fighting for their approval. Rachel drove aimlessly, her mind racing. She had spent nearly a year saving Blue Ridge Inn, only to watch it unravel in months under Mark's reckless leadership. And her parents let it happen? That morning, after Mark fired Maria, something inside Rachel snapped. She couldn't fix this anymore. She pulled into a small parking lot to clear her head. That's when she saw it. The old Evergreen Lodge, abandoned for years. The for sale sign in the window seemed to taunt her. Rachel knew the place well. It had once been Blue Ridge's biggest competitor before shutting down due to mismanagement. Prime location, stunning mountain views, but in desperate need of restoration. She sat there, gripping the steering wheel as a wild thought took hold. What if she stopped fighting for her family's approval and built something of her own? For months she had begged her parents to listen, to see her value, but they never would. They had made their choice. Now it was time for her to make hers. Rachel picked up her phone and dialed her realtor. "Hi Lisa, I need you to set up a viewing. I want to see the Evergreen Lodge first thing tomorrow morning." As she hung up, a rush of clarity and excitement flooded her. For the first time in months, Rachel wasn't just reacting. She was taking control. And this time, no one would take it away from her. The next morning, Rachel Carter stood in front of Evergreen Lodge, staring at the worn-out building. The place was a mess. Peeling paint, boarded-up windows, a cracked driveway. But Rachel didn't see ruin. She saw potential. Inside, the dust-covered lobby smelled of neglect, but the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The location was better than the Blue Ridge Inn, closer to hiking trails and had space for a high-end spa. Rachel's heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. By the time she walked out, she knew. This was her fresh start. Within a week, she signed the paperwork. Rachel poured every ounce of experience into transforming Evergreen Lodge. She rebranded it as the Summit Lodge, a luxury, eco-friendly retreat designed to offer a high-end guest experience. She hired top-tier staff, many of whom had quit Blue Ridge under Mark's disastrous leadership. Maria was the first to join. Construction crews worked around the clock. Rachel designed every detail: locally sourced materials, modern rustic decor, a farm-to-table restaurant. Meanwhile, word spread. Some called her move ruthless, saying she was betraying her family. Others, especially former Blue Ridge staff, quietly cheered her on. Rachel didn't care about the whispers. For the first time, she was building something where no one could take credit for her work. And this time, it was all hers. 3 months after the Summit Lodge opened, it was already making waves. Guest reviews were glowing, bookings were at capacity, and travel blogs were calling it the best new luxury retreat in North Carolina. Meanwhile, Blue Ridge Inn was in freefall. The guest complaints piled up: poor service, unclean rooms, inexperienced staff. Mark, in his usual arrogance, refused to admit his mistakes. Instead, he blamed changing market conditions for their decline. Rachel saw it coming. One evening, she was reviewing financial reports in her office when her phone buzzed. Mom. She hesitated before answering. "Honey, we need to talk," her mother said, her voice unusually soft. "The bank is threatening to pull the loan. We might lose Blue Ridge." Rachel exhaled, unsurprised. "We need you to come back," her father added. "Help your brother fix this." Rachel leaned back in her chair, glancing out at the vibrant lobby of the summit. Her lobby. She had predicted this moment. And yet, hearing them ask for her help felt different. She wanted to feel vindicated, but instead she just felt tired. Rachel closed her eyes, steadying herself. "I'll give you advice," she said finally. "But I'm not coming back to clean up Mark's mess." Her mother started to protest, but Rachel cut her off. "You made your choice," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Now you live with it." 6 months after the Summit Lodge opened, Rachel Carter stood in a packed ballroom at the Carolina Hospitality Awards. Her hotel had been nominated for Best New Boutique Lodge. Across the room, she spotted her parents seated at the back. Their faces were unreadable, but Rachel could sense the weight of the moment. Blue Ridge Inn hadn't been nominated for anything. The announcement came, and the award for Best New Boutique Lodge goes to the Summit Lodge. Applause erupted around her. Her team cheered, embracing each other in excitement. Rachel took the stage, gripping the award in her hands. She glanced at her parents, her father gave a slight nod, and her mother's eyes glistened. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And yet, Rachel realized something. She didn't need it anymore. She had spent her entire life seeking their validation, hoping they'd see her worth. But tonight, standing on this stage, she understood. Her success was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving herself right. As she raised her glass later with her team, she looked around at the people who had believed in her from the start. These were the people who mattered. Rachel had built something of her own. And this time, no one could take it away from her. A week after the award ceremony, Rachel Carter walked into the lobby of the Summit Lodge, inhaling the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and pine wood. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the space she had designed from the ground up. This was hers. Guests laughed as they planned their day. Her staff moved efficiently, smiling as they welcomed new arrivals. Everything ran seamlessly, just as she had envisioned. For the first time in years, Rachel felt something she had never felt at Blue Ridge. Peace. Her parents hadn't reached out since the awards night. And honestly, she was okay with that. She no longer needed their approval. She had built something extraordinary, and she had done it on her own terms. Rachel had spent so much of her life chasing validation from people who never truly saw her. But now, she was done looking back. Her phone buzzed. A new email. A boutique hotel in Colorado wanted her consulting expertise. A smile spread across her face. There was still so much ahead for her. Rachel stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. Because for the first time, she wasn't fighting to be seen. She was simply living. Lessons learned from breaking free. 1. You don't need validation to be successful. Rachel spent years seeking approval from her parents, only to realize that she didn't need their recognition to prove her worth. Success is not about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. 2. Know when to walk away. No matter how much Rachel gave to Blue Ridge Inn, her contributions were never truly valued. Sometimes the best decision is to stop fighting for a place where you will never be appreciated and build something of your own. 3-day family loyalty has limits. While family is important, blind loyalty to those who don't respect your efforts can hold you back. Rachel's parents chose Mark despite his incompetence, and she had to choose herself instead. 4. Turn betrayal into motivation. Instead of letting anger consume her, Rachel channeled her frustration into creating something better. She built the Summit Lodge, not out of revenge, but out of a desire to succeed on her own terms. 5. Success is defined by you, not others. In the end, Rachel realized she didn't need an apology or validation. Her success, happiness, and independence were proof enough. True fulfillment comes from creating a life that aligns with your values, not from external approval.